say I don't want to get ahead of myself, because I cannot even assume that there will be a second referendum. We simply don't know. The government is still reviewing and still analysing, together with the other parties in Parliament, what the electorate said, and they want to try and design a way forward that in the first instance is most respectful of what the people have already said. Thank you for your question.
Who would like to be next? Please. And do introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Brian Becker. You mentioned that Ireland has a lot of biotechnological advances and research. I was just curious as to what kind of research projects are at the top of the list right now.
That's a question I don't know the answer to, and I'll be very frank in telling you that. The reason for that is that the business that I'm normally engaged in is the business of the United Nations. That's my job. If you were to ask me about peace and security, if you're asked to ask me about humanitarian relief in Africa, if you were to ask me about so many of these things, hopefully they wouldn't be too hard questions. I could answer you immediately. There is a very large establishment in New York of Irish officials and public agencies whose job it is to promote investment in those sectors. I was speaking to them today, and they were saying, they were underlining to me the scale of the investment in R&D and product development at home. But in the rush that they were in and I were in, we did not go into the details of the precise projects that are at the top of the list. But Brian, if you leave your name with me, I'll make sure somebody gets in touch with you tomorrow who could fill that out.
Can I ask you to comment a bit on family life in Ireland? What is the family like? Ireland had a reputation of being a very virile people, and you shared with Alaska the ability to produce a lot of children. Do you still have large families, or has the size of the family shrunk with economic development?
I thought for a moment you were going to ask me, could I see Russia from where I live, but the answer to that would be no, I'm afraid. It's very handsome of you to commend to a full-blooded Irishman our virility as a nation. It's one of the things I'll take with me this evening. But it is the case that the average family sizes in Ireland were very large in the past, and typically when people came here, they continued to have large families. One of the most seminal personal experiences I had living here the last time I was here was I brought the kids to, my wife and I brought the kids to Gettysburg Field. And we did a tour at Cemetery Ridge there, where the Union Army defended against Pickett's charge. And each of the Union states that was fighting there has erected, as I'm sure you know, a memorial to its troops who fell there. And what's an amazing thing for an Irish person, or for anybody to see, is if you look at the names of those who fell, from Pennsylvania, from Michigan, from Rhode Island, all the way along, the great preponderance, and I'm talking about 90% plus of the names, were either British, German, or Irish. Because as you know better than I do, the great waves of Italian immigration, of Eastern Europeans, of Jewish immigration, had not yet arrived here. And so for me, it was like a photograph in stone of the composition of this society here. Completely different to the society that you have today in its composition. And that's a way of saying that the Irish were here early, and they were here in numbers, and they multiplied here. And I understand that the last census here in this country asked, which country do your forebears come from? And the number who put down Ireland in that box as representing some degree or some important degree of their ancestry was something like 43 million, and was the third largest after British and Germans. So it's simply, I guess, to illustrate the point that the Irish didn't waste their time when they came to the when they came to the States, and they continued a tradition that there had been at home of having large numbers of kids. Part of that was economic. You might think it would make great sense to have only one or two kids, and then you'd be able to husband more tightly the resources of the family, etc. But there was, as in other cultures, including your own, the need for there to be sufficient kids to look after parents and to look after the larger family as people grew old. And then there was the model, the ideal of the Catholic family for so many, and there was the religious injunction opposing contraception. Contraception became generally available in Ireland only about a generation ago, and like in other countries, we've seen the same effect in continental Europe and elsewhere. Greater affluence has been accompanied by a reduction in family sizes, and now the average number of kids per family is something like 2 point something. You still find people who do it the old-fashioned way, so to speak, and who would have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children, but it's much less the norm now than it used to be.
If you ever have a problem of aging, give me a telephone call and we'll send you people from Pakistan to help out.
Thank you.
We have time for just one more question, as long as it's not about the virility of the Irish. Yes, sir. Come down to the microphone.
Good evening. My name is Abdulaziz Ali. I am a graduate student in the political science department. And I actually had two questions, but he said one, so I'm just going to ask one question. The Irish have had a very different European experience. It's not the quintessential, and excuse my phrase, but like white European experience. In that light, what is the official stance of Ireland on the occupation in the Palestinian territories today? And how do you, like in that respect, not just Palestine, but the Middle East in general, with Iraq also kind of being occupied?
Thank you very much for your question. It's a very perceptive question. As I say, it's a very perceptive question. And it goes to the heart of Ireland's role at the United Nations. And I have temporary custody, if you like, or temporary charge of the daily care of that role, which has been built up over half a century. We came to independence in the 1920s, and it's fair to say that the British were not immediately persuaded of the merits of our moving to an independent status. That is a road that was travelled by a very large number of countries, including India at the time of partition, with the birth of India and Pakistan and East Pakistan at that time. Another parallel was that our move to independence was accompanied by partition. So joy unrestrained was in fact restrained, but because of the tragedy of partition. But we joined the United Nations in 1955. It took us 10 years to get in there. We had applied at the very beginning in 1945, but the Soviets vetoed it in the Security Council because they thought we'd be too close an ally of the United States, and they didn't want another echo piece of the United States as they saw it. Little did they know in the UN. Eventually, we got in in 1950.